Well, hello, Rebecca.
Hello, Scott.
Welcome to Hardy Party of 5.5.
Welcome.
Do you know what time it is?
Time for me to get a cough drop.
It's time for you to get a cough drop, yes. Rebecca's got a little bit of laryngitis today.
I lost my voice yesterday at work. I don't feel bad. I just really sound terrible.
And it's been so nice and peaceful here at the house the last few days.
Well, then you can carry on without me today.
No, I want you here.
I probably sound like a screeching chalkboard in people's ears right now.
I'll try to interpret for you as you
Thank
talk.
you. I appreciate that.
Okay, no, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
Because today we're talking college football.
Yes.
And the time is college football playoff time.
That's right.
So we've decided to have someone on from ESPN.
ESPN.
And who is it, Rebecca?
It is ANISH SHROFF.
And he is here. He is also the new play-by-play voice of the Carolina Panthers.
That's right.
So he's going to take us all through the college playoff and what he thought about just how the committee did on the top four.
Right.
And some of the big stories in college football this year.
Yeah. And I like what he had to say about the 12 teams playing in the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, they're going to expand to 12 teams coming up.
Yeah, so. I thought that was interesting.
And it also gave us a chance to wear our favorite Division I and Division II football teams.
That's right.
I've got Oklahoma State.
Go Pokes.
Go Pokes. Mm-hmm. Go Mediocre right here. We're going to get there one day.
Go Mediocre. Not in wrestling. They're really good at wrestling.
No, they're amazing at wrestling.
Yes.
They have all the banners around the basketball stadium.
And then
we have SNU Division II, who, by the way, had their best record ever in Division II this year at 5-6. And bolts up.
Yeah. And didn't Jake's quarterback do something pretty amazing?
Gage did a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
He was like the offensive player of the year and all kinds of things. Yeah.
The conference, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And the GAC. So
yeah,
he's pretty amazing.
Really impressive.
Yep.
So let's get to it because we want to hear all things college football. So please enjoy this interview with our very favorite ESPN broadcaster. All right. ANISH SHROFF, thank you so much for joining Hardy Party of 5.5. You've got a lot of cool things. Our son's a college football player. He's been dying for us to talk to you. Can't wait to hear all your things. So we just want to hear a little bit about you. You grew up in New Jersey, right?
I did, yeah. The Sunshine State.
So how important was sports to you growing up? And you wanted to talk about sports or play sports, or did you do all those things?
I did. It was real important. You know, I'm first generation. My parents were immigrants. So for our family, sports was sort of a way in. Mm-hmm. When I started playing Little League, it was our way into American culture, our way into America. My dad got here in the early 70s and watched the Yankees and the Mets, in the 70s and the 80s and became a big baseball fan. And I think I was 6 or 7 years old. I went to a Yankees Blue Jays game with my dad and, Dave Winfield and Don Mattingly and Jesse Barfield, some pretty good teams. I mean, they weren't good teams, but they had some pretty good players. And kind of became a Yankees fan, and that sort of started it. Started with baseball. So yeah, sports in our family was big growing up. We watched it, and like I said, for my mom and dad, it was kind of their way in as immigrants, to the fabric of this country.
Oh wow, that's cool. And we've coached a lot of youth sports with our kids, and you're right, it does build that community. And I didn't even think about it, for an immigrant, that's how you would just connect with people in the neighborhood.
That you connect with people in the neighborhood, and that's the water cooler talk. My dad was a photographer and a small business owner, and so back in the day of 1 hour photo, people would chit chat with him. And hey, did you watch Thurman Munson last night? Did you see Don Mattingly hit another home run? Did you see Ricky Henderson stole 2 more bases? And so there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
Doc Gooden, threw a 2-hitter. David Cohn threw a shutout. So it became sort of this chatter, and then from there, baseball cards was sort of the thing that really got me into it, outside of playing, where I look back and I said, hey, what's one thing that I can point to when I was real little that led me to where I am now? And it was those cards. I was an avid collector, and you'd soak up the statistics, and you'd soak up all sorts of useless information that somehow has come in handy.
And you probably still have that stored in your
right.
brain somewhere, like he does.
Yeah, just don't ask me where my keys are. So
Right.
That's right.
We've talked about guys tend to have just an extra storage space for random useless sports knowledge.
Facts,
And what happened in a game like 12 years ago with 2 minutes left, for some reason we know these things.
Babe,
we do. And then when it's time to pick up your kid, you're shoot.
Oh yeah. Oh, I have kids.
You can recall what happened in like our co-ed softball games 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's been a while. So are you still a Yankee fan?
I still am. Yeah, still a Yankees fan.
So pretty happy about the big signing, I'm assuming.
They've got a lot of money, and in recent years, they have not really used that as financial muscle and really their competitive advantage. 9 years for a guy who's 31 and injury prone, the back end will probably not be very pretty, but given what he means to that franchise, given all the other factors that go in terms of merchandise sales and jersey sales and putting people in the seats, you could not let a guy like Aaron Judge walk. You had to sign him.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I've noticed, like, speaking of baseball signings in general, these guys are getting long contracts, and they're going to be 39, 40, 41. What's the reasoning for teams? Because those last 3 or 4 years, they're not going to get much out of that investment. Are they?
I think people sort of
first 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think people sort of view it as, you're paying for the short term, you'll take the hit on the back end. And again, the market dictates it, right?
Yeah.
You're worth what your competition deems that you're worth. And I always say in any line of business and any line of work, it's better to be overpaid than underrated.
That's right. So don't you think broadcasters and announcers should make as much as the players?
I'm just going to fight you on that.
Oh gosh. Okay. So there's a pretty interesting start to your career, because you started kind of on a reality show. And I remember watching this, speaking of useless, like all this sports knowledge I have. It was an ESPN show called Dream Jobs, right? In 2014. Is that how you kind of got 2004? Yeah, sorry, 2004. So is that kind of how you got your start in broadcasting?
Yes and no. I went to school for it. I graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism. I had done a ton of college radio. I actually had come out of college with quite a bit of real world reps. I'd worked briefly before the show for a sports radio station in Syracuse. And, that helped me, I think, make some important contacts. That helped get my name out there. But contrary to the advice of a lot of people, I sort of went backwards. I didn't win, which was probably the best thing to happen. So had I won, I was 21, 22 years old at the time. I wasn't ready, for ESPN, but I did walk away knowing, I think I know what they're looking for, and I think I know what it takes. And so after kind of figuring out life for the next few months and doing some freelance work, I had opportunities to kind of do bigger stuff, but in a limited role. And I really wanted to go back to where I can cut my teeth. So I applied for a job in Yakima, Washington, market 126 for $20,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
For 2 years there, I basically cut my teeth and figured out the craft. And those 2 years, more than anything else, in my opinion, have set me up for my career.
Wow, that's really cool.
Well, and that sounds like we just interviewed Jason Romano a couple of weeks ago, who was at ESPN, and he mentioned like the first time he went in, he didn't get the job, and after all that, he was thankful he didn't because it helped him get better before he came back to ESPN. So it sounds like the same thing with you.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, this business can be brutal in the sense that a lot of times you don't get an opportunity to make a second impression. And I knew even, on that run that I had on the show, I was one of the final three. I knew I'd made an impression. I didn't think I had at that time, to be completely honest, what it took to stick, not at that age. But when I went to Yakima and I went to my first real job in television, yeah, I experimented. And I was always treating it as, this is the canvas to kind of figure out what your voice is, what it is that you do well, what are your strengths, and then find out what your weaknesses are and really work on those and find what cuts through for viewers, finds what cuts through for your audience, and tell those compelling stories. So I remember walking out of there thinking, all right, I think I can do this. And I was there for about 2 years. So yeah, weirdly, a lot of people were disappointed for me that I didn't win on the reality show. I wouldn't even say for a minute I was disappointed. It sounds funny, like you get that far and you get that close, but I wasn't looking just to, be there for 15 minutes. I was looking for a career in this business.
Right.
I knew long-term, things were just getting started.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so for those, you mentioned strengths and weaknesses, and just for the young broadcasters out there, what was like a weakness you saw that you had, and how did you work on it? Do you remember?
Interviewing, probably the biggest one, and it's probably the most common mistake of all young broadcasters. We ask questions that are too long. We use too much prologue and preamble, and you're not getting the best from your audience. You guys do this, you bring on a guest, you're bringing on a guest, that's who you're teasing, right? And it's the same thing. Sometimes we want to sound so smart and look so smart, and we tell our subject all these things they already know, right?
Yeah.
And so I just kind of figured out, okay, how to ask better questions with specific demands. My strong suit kind of growing up was writing and storytelling. And then it was using that and combining it with the video elements and writing to your video and little things like that. And you basically find a voice. And I've told people that, in this business, you can't fake authenticity.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, don't try to be something that you're not. If you're funny, be funny. If you're dry, be dry. If you're smart, be smart. If you're witty, be witty. But if you're not funny, don't try to be funny, because that does not play. If you're not smart, in a literary sense or whatever, don't try to be that version, because you'll be exposed.
Right.
So a lot of it was just trying to figure out, okay, which lane am I best suited to travel where I can, hit my climbing speed and I can get to the altitude I need to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe he's going to grade us on our interviewing skills later.
I was just thinking, how have the questions been so
No,
far?
I'm totally the funny one.
The questions have been great. Yeah.
So you have broadcasted college football, college baseball, college basketball, and lacrosse, which is like the hot new thing for sure. But today we want to talk about college football.
Sure.
What, in your opinion, are some of like the surprising stories this year, or even like important stories this year in college football?
There's a lot of them. I think one is just that we're seeing a little bit of a new guard. Alabama not in the college football playoff. No,
It's so weird.
So weird.
We're seeing really, I think, not just the ascendancy of Georgia, but maybe Georgia now being the new Alabama. They had been building for that. Last year they got over the hump, beat Bama in the title game, looked dominant doing so. And, they've restocked that defense, which was hard to do given the amount of talent they lost off that defense. We're seeing a new world order of NIL and the transfer portal. I don't know if that's going to be as wild as it is now. I do think there's going to be, a market correction. Guys are going to want to transfer, and a lot of guys end up without a spot. And for a lot of those guys, that means you end up without a college degree.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, the NIL stuff is, blown up all over the place. I think you'll see some regulation because essentially it's everything that we thought about college sports now on the table, right? They're going to pay players. Like now, be very open about it. Come here. We got NILs waiting for you.
Yeah.
Departments devoted to that. So we're starting to see this new world order, and we're going to see which coaches can adapt to it, which coaches can't adapt to it.
Yeah.
Lincoln Riley at USC, getting that program back to national prominence this year, I thought was a huge story. But again, he used the transfer portal. He went and got his quarterback from Oklahoma. He went and got the best receiver in the country from Pittsburgh. Conference realignment. I think the dominoes that are falling, Texas and Oklahoma, both kind of down still.
Yeah.
Now moving to the SEC, where the competitive landscape is increasing. Meanwhile, we might be starting to see the next wave in the Big 12 with TCU cracking the college football playoff. So, there's a lot of cool stuff. I think to see Michigan in the college football playoff 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Are we starting to see the tide turned in that Michigan-Ohio State rivalry? Not ready to call that just yet, but you can't underestimate and downplay what Jim Harbaugh has done these last 2 years. So, there's a lot to unpack within the sport right now, but I think there's also a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think you mentioned the transfer portal. I think that's going to help teams get better quicker. Like used to, you had to build a program and it would take 3 or 4 years to bring your guys in. Now you're just getting guys over the summer. You're getting a new guy. Like it's going to be, do you think it'll be quicker to build a program? Like USC is just suddenly, bam, on the national stage. So
it depends. I think it's going to hurt some smaller programs. You're seeing it a little in basketball, where a lot of those guys say, well, I got a chance to go play at a Power 5. I'm going to leave. Whereas before you had that guy for the duration. I think it'll be a little different once we get outside of the COVID year, which gave everybody an extra year of eligibility. So right now, teams are just older in general.
Yeah.
And if you're a team that has talent, and then you're older with fourth year sophomores, fifth year juniors, sixth year seniors, we're going to phase out of that in the next couple of years. But right now we're still in that, COVID period. So that's all part of it. But I hope for the sake of college football, we do hit a market correction. Just from folks that I talk to, they say it's harder to follow their teams. And when it's harder to follow your team, that means it's harder to follow the sport at large.
Yeah,
that's true.
for sure. Yeah, that COVID year, it's really helped some kids, and it's really shot some kids in the foot. Yeah, that happened to our son. He had several players starting in front of him that were fifth year, super seniors, and it was just the way it was.
Because he was a sophomore on the field, but a senior, he's graduating in May.
Yeah, so. He redshirted and then he has COVID year. So
crazy time.
Yeah.
Okay, so the college football playoff is set. So we're going to get your predictions. We want predictions. And we're going to get some scouting reports on the teams. So you've got Georgia's number 1, Michigan's number 2, TCU, Big 12.
Big 12
is number 3.
We're Oklahoma State.
We're Oklahoma State, though. I had to remember.
So, and that was they had a disappointing year.
Yeah, they did.
With Oklahoma and Texas down, we were like, all right. But Gundy could pull it out.
For a while, it looked pretty good, and then right around mid-season, it just went in the other direction.
It did.
Yeah, it was sad. And then you have Ohio State at 4.
Yeah.
So it got kind of interesting because Utah hammered USC, which knocked them out, and then K-State eked out the win against TCU, but TCU still makes it in the playoffs.
Right.
So, and we conducted our informal poll online, and 72% of the people said they agreed with the committee. So what's your take on that, the last second moves there with USC and TCU? Do you think they got it right as far as the Final Four?
I did. I look at one thing, which is if you're trying to find, some common denominator in the selection process, because what's important changes every year with the complexion and the makeup of the selection committee. But the one hard and fast fact has been you can't lose twice. We have not had a 2-loss team in the college football playoff.
Yeah.
And so when, again, USC lost, and then you had Bama out there, no conference championship, sitting at home, 2 losses. Tennessee not only lost twice, they lost their quarterback, which, again, given the subjective nature of their committee, where you're looking to evaluate the best teams, Tennessee is different without Hendon Hooker. That took them out of the equation. LSU might have had a shot. They lost to Texas A&M. That was inexplicable.
Yeah.
Obviously, they lost to Georgia to make it a moot point, but they would have been in a position
Right.
had they won the SEC championship. So at the end of the day, TCU loses a close game. Do I think on paper they're one of the 4 most talented teams in the country? No. 4 most deserving, certainly a case. I really had no issue with it. Those were the 4 teams that I thought the committee would put in. The other teams that were in position, all they had to do was win, and a lot of dominoes fell the way they did, allowing for some of those other teams like a TCU to stay in the field.
Yeah, for sure.
When Saban, it was funny watching Saban because he's got the 2 losses, but he's like, they're really close losses, you know.
Well, it's funny. People were killing him like, oh, there's Nick Saban lobbying for his team. Like, why wouldn't you?
You might as well, yeah.
If somebody's going to give you that platform and you're speaking to an audience and that the playoff committee might be watching,
and you're Nick Saban,
go make a case for your team. So I have no problem with what he did.
Yeah.
We've got everybody trying to up in arms, the fake outrage that's out there. But I just kind of thought, all right, it's like any politician, you give them a platform to message.
Yeah.
They're going to take it.
Yeah.
You got to give it a shot, you know?
Okay. Well, this could get interesting for me because I moved here from Georgia. So I wore a Georgia Bulldog shirt in high school, but now, TCU is 20 minutes from here.
20 minutes away.
We've been Big 12 forever now. And so I don't know what I'm going to do.
What are you going to do?
I don't know.
About that, aren't you?
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into each matchup for the, okay. So you have Michigan versus TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. Who are you picking for that game, and who are the players we should be watching out for that'll make the biggest impact?
Well, the kid who's been playing running back these last few weeks, the Edmonds kid from Michigan, has been tremendous. Saw what he did in the Ohio State game with Corum down. I think all eyes are on that Michigan offensive line. Can they control the trenches? Finalist for the Joe Moore Award after winning that award last year. And then for TCU, offensively, they're so good. They're so explosive. Max Duggan's put together a campaign, I think, that's worthy of the Heisman Trophy, to be honest. And in my opinion, I think he's the favorite. It's not the strongest field this year, but given how he's played this year through the course of it and how he's played in the end of some of those close games that TCU has had, I really like Max Duggan. I just don't know if TCU is going to be able to move the ball against that Michigan defense the way they've done so against some of these other teams in the Big 12. That's a hard matchup. Michigan's got a chance to really control the trenches. But I do think that game is certainly, to me, the game that I think is more compelling because TCU's got a decided advantage in that game at the most important position in college football. Yeah. And that's quarterback. And as much as we talk about quarterbacks at the NFL being all the difference, it's even more so at the college level. And if Max Duggan plays well and he can make some throws and he can make some plays, TCU beating Michigan wouldn't be as much of a shock as, let's say, Ohio State beating Georgia for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So are you picking TCU there, an official pick?
Boy, yeah, why not?
I'd
love to see it. Why not? I think they can pull it out.
Yeah, I think so.
Georgia, I just think is on a different level.
They really seem like
great quarterback. They got some really good receivers. They're talented on offense, but their defense at times this year has been a little suspect. We saw what Michigan can do to them, and Georgia's just a supersized version of Michigan, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
Blake Bowers might be the toughest matchup in the country at tight end. Stetson Bennett, I don't know if he's Heisman finalist worthy, but he's better than people think. And I remember going into the playoffs last year thinking, what if Stetson Bennett's got to make plays for Georgia? Well, he did. And he made some big plays. And he was the reason they won the game against Alabama. And he made some throws against Michigan in the semifinals as well. And the way this Georgia defense is playing, Jalen Carter, I mean, come on. Georgia right now, to me, goes into this thing as an overwhelming favorite.
Yeah. So you think Georgia's going to win the whole thing?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so what are your picks for victory?
I think I'm going to have to go TCU, and then I'm going to pick Georgia.
Okay.
TCU in the first.
So we're all agreeing on that
Yeah.
one. Okay. And we pretty much all agree that it's going to be Georgia. I mean, it would be shocking if it's not Georgia.
If it wasn't Georgia.
Listen, I think Ohio State, I'm not going to discount them completely. I do think of the three other teams in the field, Ohio State's got the best chance of beating Georgia. I just don't see it, though. I just don't see anybody beating Georgia.
Yeah, I agree.
One with USC losing, it feels like Ohio State just kind of snuck in there, so you don't think about them. You know what I mean? Like, oh, it seems like they barely squeaked in because USC lost.
Yeah. So recently they talked about extending that, playoff to 12 teams. What are your thoughts on that? I've been saying that they need to do this forever. So what do you think about that?
I love it because the one thing that college football has moved into in recent years has been this championship or bust phenomenon, which has never really been college football. It was always have a great season, beat your rival, go to a great bowl game, right? It was not this championship or bust type of sport that it's now become. It's the Yankee doctrine applied to college football. And so we've sort of reached this point in college football now where if you don't make the playoff or if you don't win a national championship, it's like your season's useless. Going to the Fiesta Bowl, if it's not one of the semifinal bowls, that doesn't matter anymore. No, that should matter. So I just feel it's been concentrated in these last few years with so few teams. Let's bring more fan bases in. Let's give more fan bases something to play for through the course of the regular season. Guess what? If you don't make the top 4 teams, you might be seed 7 or 8, and that might be good enough to get into a playoff. And I just think that enriches the sport. I've covered the FCS playoffs in the past, and I've done quite a few FCS championships. And for some teams, getting in is a big deal. I got to look at the rankings and I got to see what the playoff field would be like. But okay, as a Syracuse alum, for example, in 2018, for the first time in 17 years, they finished in the AP poll and they were number 15 in the country or whatever. As a Syracuse football fan who hasn't had a whole lot to cheer about, in the last 20 years, that's a season where you're getting to the end game and you're thinking there might even be a chance you can get to the playoff, whether you whether you win or not. It almost becomes secondary and tertiary, but it solidifies your season. And, everyone says, oh, there's too many bowls. There's this and that. That wasn't a complaint before when there were too many bowls because going to a bowl game meant something. And in some ways, this hyper emphasis on just the playoff, just the BCS championship has taken away from that. And it'll be healthy, in my opinion, for the game when you can activate more fan bases for the duration.
Yeah. To me, it's like no different than having Kansas play Montana State in the first round,
Right.
Like in basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it helps OSU fans in football because we tend to finish in that 10 to 15 range. So that would definitely help us.
Yeah.
Well, I look at it too. At the end of the day, why do we watch sports, right? We watch sports because it's the greatest reality show on television.
Yeah.
And yes, most of the time Goliath is going to kick David's ass, right? But when App State beats Michigan, when Douglas knocks out Tyson, when you have that kind of win, I was there and called the game when App State beat Texas A&M this year.
Wow.
That's the stuff that you remember. That's why we watch sports.
Yes.
You guys see it in the NCAA tournament, right? When a Florida Gulf Coast or a UMBC takes out Virginia. That's the stuff that gets us riled up. That's what makes it fun to see a St. Peter's beat a Kentucky and go to that's the stuff that we love. And it may not happen every year, and there may be some years where those teams get wiped out. But when it happens, I think it gives us as sports fans, it gives us that moment that we hold on to forever.
Absolutely. That you tell your grandkids about.
Right.
I remember when.
I was at that game when you really weren't.
Yeah.
Okay, and it can get boring when the same teams are in every year, for sure.
I agree, and I think it's gotten stale for some people because it's been the same teams, and the same coaches, and people just want a little bit of new blood.
Okay, speaking of not boring, we got to talk about prime time, because if we're talking college football, you've got Deion Sanders. He went from Jackson State to Colorado. So I thought it was pretty hilarious, his press conferences and all that. And there was a moment when he's introducing himself to the team, and you talked about the transfer portal, and he's like, if you're thinking about getting the transfer portal, go ahead and do it, because I can bring in somebody better.
Yeah.
So that's pretty authentic, I think. He's just letting them know. So what do you think about Deion's style in general? Is it annoying or is it refreshing to you? Or is it somewhere in between?
Sometimes with sports, we often forget that there are real world parallels. And think of the company that you may work for, and a new CEO takes over, and you have a new boss, and you got that first meeting, and he calls everybody in and says, if you can't cut it, we'll go find somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what that was.
Yeah.
And college football has become this big business.
Yeah.
And the coaches treat it as a business. The players now, with NIL and the ability to transfer and take their services somewhere else, also have that ability and that freedom that in the past did not exist for them. So I like the fact that he's authentic. I like the fact that when people were asking him about it, he said, yeah, I'm talking to other teams.
Yeah.
And people were all up in arms about that. And I said, well, hey, Hugh Freeze at Liberty was talking to Auburn, early November, and they lost the last 3 games of the season. And it's a pretty well-known secret that part of the reason that they lost to UConn and New Mexico State down the stretch after starting 8-1 was because their coach was distracted and had his attention elsewhere. Coaches do that all the time. People do that all the time. You're at one job, and if somebody else is interested, you're talking to them, and you're, figuring out what your next step is. So Deion was just honest about it, whereas most coaches lie about it.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of the NBA when all these super teams get together, and they've talked for years to each other. It's not like they're not talking about, hey, I'd love to play with you. But then they have to act like, oh, we've never said anything to each other. Yeah. It's just like, we all know this is happening. So, yeah.
Well, I always find it funny when we ask coaches, hey, are the reports true that you're taking this other job? And they always say no. And part of me always thinks, well, what can you say? Right?
Yeah.
I always think of, let's forget that they're a coach and just some employee. And let's say, you're hunting for another job and you've got an offer, but guess what? All the T's haven't been crossed. All the I's haven't been dotted. There's a few details you're working out. And one of your coworkers gets a wind of it and says, hey, are you leaving? I thought I saw something on your computer. And you're like, oh, no, I'm not leaving. I mean, obviously you don't want that to get out until it's done. So I don't have a problem with, hey, people want to go and find another opportunity. I don't have an issue with that. And folks have said, well, Deion, made some promises in the beginning at Jackson State. And listen, I understand that. I just think when you've been in this business long enough, you can't be Pollyanna about it.
Yeah.
This is a business for everybody. Guys change jobs all the time. And Brett Bielema goes to Arkansas and it's Woo Pig. And, now he's at Illinois and it's Go Illini, right? Allegiances change. Where your heart is, it changes. What matters to you changes. And, everyone's got a stump speech. And Deion, the one thing that I do like about him is that he's pretty honest about it. A lot of guys would just lie about it.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So speaking of new opportunities, you got a new opportunity this season. You're the voice of the Carolina Panthers now. So tell us what that's like, and how did your family react to you becoming the voice of the Panthers?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's been an interesting season. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's been pretty long. Yeah,
been an interesting season to dive in, but the team's been great to me. The franchise has been great. Everybody from ownership to the folks that I work with on a daily basis have been incredibly good to me, and they've continued to let me do what I do with ESPN, and have been really accommodating with my schedule. For my family, it was great. We've lived in Charlotte now for 11 plus years, and this has become home. And, it's funny. I say this after telling you all the stuff about the coaches, right? Like I would never go anywhere else. I convinced my dad to move down here. I convinced my brother to move down here. So we've got my dad 10 minutes away. We've got my brother 10 minutes away with his family in the other direction. We've loved it here. We plan to, stay here forever. And so the reality was, had this job or a job like this been open in Cleveland or San Francisco or Pittsburgh or Dallas, I would not have had interest.
Right.
What interested me about the Panthers job was that it was in Charlotte, and it was really a chance to just further put down roots in this community. And for me, Charlotte being home, the Panthers give you a platform, a real platform to be actionable, and to help out in the community. We did an event, this past week called Joy to the Carolinas. There's a place called Carowinds, which is like a Six Flags. It's an amusement park, and they had all sorts of families who were in need, and they gave them groceries and clothes and toys, and
Cool.
we're there volunteering as a team, and just to see the smiles on those kids' faces, right? They're giving them vouchers to go get their haircut, to take a family photo, to go see the dentist, to go see a doctor. And again, you're part of that. You have a platform to really impact your community in a positive way. That, as much as being able to do NFL games, mattered to me because this is now home.
Right. It's more than a job for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Scott's from North Carolina.
Yeah, I'm from the Raleigh area, like a little east of Raleigh. So
yeah,
it's a pretty area. It's a pretty state.
So one last question before we wrap up. Do you have a favorite stadium that you've been to? Any stadium that you just think is great?
Oh, there's a few. I would say for college basketball, Fog Allen Fieldhouse at Kansas and Cameron Indoor are special. Cameron Indoor is unique in that when you walk in, it feels like a high school gym. It really does. And then it just sort of overwhelms you when the crazies come in, and we call the games all the way up in the bird's nest.
Yeah.
And then Fog, when they do rock chalk and they have their pregame ritual, that place shakes and you can feel the floorboards move. And that to me is 1A and 1B. I love those two places.
Yeah.
The Carrier Dome for basketball is always special to me. You get 30,000 in a building for a big Syracuse game. And then for football, I've got a few favorites. I love the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, one, because it's my alma mater, two, because it has one of the best sight lines for a broadcaster. I mean, you've got one of the best field views. You're not way up where you need your binoculars and you can't really see the field. But there's other places. I love Clemson. North Dakota State is in the Fargo Dome. 19,000 feels like 90. It's as loud as a wood chipper. They go nuts. They've got some of the best fans in the country. I did a night game at Florida State when they played Florida Thanksgiving weekend, and that was probably the most electric atmosphere I've been a part of. That was crazy. That was insane. Loved every minute of that. There's a lot. Auburn, LSU, the tailgating at Ole Miss.
The Grove.
There's a lot of special atmospheres in college football that I'm lucky to be a part of.
Yeah.
Well, other than the Duke thing, I'm a Carolina fan, so I'll let you skate. Cameron does look cool though. I'd love to go there. I couldn't wear my Carolina stuff. I'd probably have to go incognito.
Yeah.
Okay. You would have to. I mean, you could. You just may not.
I'll be asking for it though. I'll definitely be asking for it if I'm wearing my Carolina stuff.
For sure.
Do you realize what a cool job you have? Like, you just talked about all these stadiums and you got so excited about it. Isn't it cool that you get to do what you do?
What a cool thing.
It is. I'm fortunate in the sense that I get to do what I love. I tell people there's a trade-off. Work-life balance can be a challenge with the travel, and I've got a 5-year-old daughter, who now misses daddy more and more when he's gone. But there's something special when I look back and I said, hey, when I was a little kid, 9-10 years old, this is what I want to do. And to be able to do it and to be able to have the opportunity to do NFL games and to do big time college sports. It's a dream. It really is. And I know, there's a lot of people that aspire to those opportunities, and I'm grateful for it. But I do say this in all sincerity, the one thing that I'm really cognizant of, and I've become more cognizant of in my life is, I'm not one where this is where the job defines me. I'm really lucky to do what I do, but there's a lot of things that I am: a dad, a husband, son, brother, a friend, human being, that means more to me than what I do for a living. And I know full well the outside world will always look at you, and because you're somewhat public, they'll look at you and through the lens of what you do for a living. But if that's all you are, then if or when that ever goes away, I see people struggle with loss of identity. Who are you? And I think when you're younger, it's easy to default to who you are is what you do for a living. The older I've gotten, I've sort of found that harmony, that synchrony in life where this is what I do for a living, and I'm really lucky to do it, and I love what I do, but this is also not who I am.
Right. Yeah. Those are wise words.
Yeah, they are.
To keep in your mind too, for younger people looking up to you. So we appreciate you taking time with us. Speaking of work-life balance, why don't you get back to your rest of your life? And we thank you so much for taking time with us. Loved hearing what you had to say. Go Dogs.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. Oh, gosh.
And we hope you have a great holiday season ahead of you.
You too. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. And this was fun. Enjoyed talking to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Well, Rebecca, we didn't fumble that interview.
That's right. It went right through the goalpost.
That's right. Well, it kind of scared me when I asked him weaknesses and strengths of broadcasters.
Why?
And he mentioned interviewing was one of his weaknesses and that you have to ask good questions. So then in my mind, I'm thinking, how have our questions been? Are we doing okay?
You felt judged.
Yeah, I was like, that's a little paranoid there. But I think it went well.
It went great.
And he had some great information about college football.
Yeah.
And he gave us some great advice on just living in general.
Yeah, work-life balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was really great. So we would love to know, who are you voting for or cheering for in this football playoff? Definitely Go Dogs here. Are you Go Dogs for sure?
Okay,
Wait, are you Go Dogs because you know they're going to win?
I'm going Dogs, if that's the true way to say it, because I know they're going to win. But I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to pull for TCU. I'm going Big 12. I have my doubts that they can do it, but it's just like he talked about. When the underdog wins, that's what sports is all about.
Right.
So I'm going for TCU to take all of this.
Yeah.
And this is now official that I'm going Frogs.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. I'm impressed, and everybody in our area will love you for that one, and
That's
probably
right.
be upset with me.
Yep.
But that's what we're going with. All right. So go watch some college football. Listen to this interview if you want to be talking all the smack with your friends about what you should be knowing, because, we have all the dish. And Hardy Party 5.5 over and out.
We'll see you next time.
And hopefully I'll have a voice.
Go Frogs.
Go Dogs.